This is Miss Anna, and if you clicked on this video, I already know something about you. Your marriage does not look the way you thought it would. Not in the way that all marriages are harder than advertised. In a specific way. In the way where you can feel yourself disappearing inside it. Where you stopped bringing certain things up because you already know how they will land. Where you stopped being fully yourself somewhere along the way and replaced yourself with a quieter, more careful version that is easier to manage around her. Where you love her and you are lonely at the same time, and you cannot fully explain that to anyone because from the outside, everything looks fine. I am going to tell you what happened. All of it. Not the version that protects her feelings. The version you actually need. From a woman who did every single one of these things to real men in real marriages before she understood what she was doing. Stay with me. This is the part nobody says. The first way women destroy their marriages is the one that starts so small you almost miss it. She stopped respecting you in private before she ever stopped respecting you in public. It began as a thought she did not say out loud. A small internal eye roll when you made a decision she would have made differently. A quiet certainty that she knew better, handled things better, saw things more clearly. She never announced this. It just settled into the way she responded to you. The slight impatience when you explained something. The way she half listened because she had already decided what she thought. The way your opinions became things she tolerated rather than things she actually considered. And because it was never said directly, you could not address it directly. You just felt it. In the temperature of conversations. In the way she talked about you to her friends. In the way she sometimes looked at you like you were a problem she had already solved and moved on from. I did this. I thought I was just being honest with myself about his limitations. What I was actually doing was slowly removing him from his own marriage. A man whose wife has stopped respecting him in private does not stand a chance in public. And most men never get told that the erosion started in her head long before it showed up in her behavior. The second way is the one that gets dressed up as communication. She weaponized vulnerability. She told you things, real things, private things, the fears she carried, the wounds from her past, the specific places where she felt most uncertain. And you held those things carefully, because that is what you do with things someone trusts you with. And then, in arguments, those things came back. Not always directly. Sometimes just as a shape. She knew which door to knock on to get the response she needed. She knew which version of you was easiest to manage, and she knew how to reach it. She learned you the way you learn something you intend to use. And you shared yourself openly because you thought that was what intimacy was supposed to look like. Nobody told you that in the wrong hands, knowing someone completely is not intimacy. It is inventory. I kept inventory. I am not proud of it. I knew exactly where every man I was with was most uncertain, and I knew exactly how close to get to it when I needed him to back down. I told myself I was just being real in arguments. What I was doing was using the most private parts of him as leverage. He never stopped trusting me. That is the part I carry. The third way is the one nobody will say at a dinner table. She made him feel stupid for wanting sex. Not by refusing it always. Sometimes. But more often by the way she received it. The sigh that was just barely audible. The way her body went somewhere else even when she stayed. The comment afterward that reframed what had just happened as something she had done for him rather than something they had shared. The slow accumulation of small signals that said, "Your desire is an inconvenience. Your wanting is something I manage rather than something I meet." And a man who receives those signals consistently does not just stop initiating. He stops feeling like himself. Because desire is not separate from identity for a man. It is connected to his sense of aliveness, his sense of being wanted, his sense of mattering in the most basic way to the person who chose him. When she makes him feel like his desire is a burden, she is not just rejecting sex. She is rejecting something much closer to his core than that. And she usually has no idea she is doing it. It is not calculated. It is just what happens when a woman stops being a participant in her own marriage and starts being a manager of it. The fourth way is the one that looks like love from the outside. She made herself indispensable by making him incompetent. She took over the household decisions, the social calendar, the children's schedules, the way things were organized and run and managed. She did it because she was capable, and it was easier than waiting for him to do it differently. And then she resented him for not doing it. And then she criticized the way he did it when he tried. And then she took it back because his way was not the right way. And gradually, without either of them fully noticing, he stopped trying. Not because he was lazy, because every attempt was met with a correction. And a man who is corrected enough times in his own home stops reaching for things in his own home. He retreats to the things he can do without being graded. And she looks at his retreat and calls it uselessness. And the uselessness she is seeing is the shape of a man who was taught, slowly and consistently, that his contribution was always going to be slightly wrong. I made a man useless once. I told myself I had high standards. What I had was a need for control dressed up as competence. And I produced exactly the man I then complained about. The fifth way is the one that arrives quietly and never announces itself. She stopped being his friend. She became his co-parent, his household manager, his appointment to keep and obligation to fulfill. She remembered every practical thing about him and forgot the rest. What he found funny, what he was proud of, what he was scared of in the quiet parts of the night, what he needed when he was struggling that had nothing to do with the solution. She knew his schedule and forgot his soul, and he felt it. Not in a way he could point to, in a way that made him lonelier inside the marriage than he would have been alone. Because loneliness outside a relationship is just loneliness. Loneliness inside one is a specific kind of grief that has no clean name and nowhere to go. A man needs his wife to be his friend. Not instead of everything else, in addition to everything else. He needs to know that she sees him, not just the role he plays in her life. When that goes, something essential goes with it, and it almost never comes back on its own. The sixth way is the one that is hardest to say because it implicates something women are rarely asked to examine. She used the children as weapons. Not always dramatically. Sometimes it was just the way she positioned herself as the real parent and him as the helper. The way she made decisions about the children without consulting him and then presented them as already done. The way she undermined his authority with them in small moments. A look, a tone, a quiet reversal of something he had just said. The way she talked about him to the children in ways that were not quite kind. Not vicious, just not kind. And children absorb everything. They learn from what they see who has authority in the home and who does not. They learn who is to be taken seriously and who can be negotiated around. And a man who has been quietly positioned as the lesser parent in his own home eventually stops parenting with full confidence, because confidence requires standing. And his standing was taken in increments too small to fight individually, but large enough in accumulation to change everything. I know women who did this without ever once believing they were doing it. That is the most important thing to understand about this particular destruction. It almost never feels like destruction from the inside. It feels like being the more involved parent. It feels like maintaining standards. It feels like protecting the children. What it is doing is dismantling the man they chose to build a family with. And the children, who needed both parents fully present and equally respected, pay the longest price. The seventh way is the one I carry the most weight about, because this one I did with full awareness, even when I would not have admitted it. She made leaving feel safer than staying. Not by being cruel enough that leaving was obvious, by being just difficult enough that the idea of peace somewhere else became the thing he thought about. She calibrated it perfectly, without knowing she was calibrating anything. Enough warmth to keep him, enough friction to keep him off balance, enough love to make him stay, and enough chaos to make him fantasize about leaving. And a man living in that space is not really living in his marriage. He is managing it, calculating it, surviving it. He has stopped building anything because building requires believing in the foundation. And she gave him just enough reason to doubt the foundation that he stopped pouring anything real into it. He did not leave. A lot of them do not leave. They just go somewhere inside themselves where she cannot reach them. And she wonders why he is distant. She wonders why he stopped trying. She wonders what happened to the man she married. And the answer is standing right in front of her. He is still there. He is just gone. Now, let me tell you what I want you to do with all of this. Not use it as a weapon. Not walk back into your marriage with a list and a score to settle, but understand it clearly, without the fog of self-doubt that has been sitting over everything for longer than it should have. If you recognized your marriage in these 7 things, you are not crazy. You have been losing ground in a slow and specific way, and now you have language for it. Language matters. You cannot address something you cannot name. Name it. First, to yourself. Then, if there is enough left to work with, to her. Not in anger. With the steadiness of a man who finally understands what has been happening and is choosing to say so instead of absorbing it silently for another year. And if she cannot hear it, if the naming of it becomes just another thing she turns back on you, then you have information, real information, about whether this marriage has the structural capacity to actually change. That is not a small thing to know. That is everything. To the woman watching this, who felt something shift while I was talking, I know this was uncomfortable. I know some of it felt unfair. Sit with that discomfort instead of reacting to it. Because discomfort that comes from recognition is worth listening to. You did not get into your marriage to destroy it. But good intentions do not cancel out damaging patterns. The work is not in defending yourself. The work is in asking honestly whether any of this is true. And if it is, deciding what you are going to do with that truth. Not for him, for the marriage, for the person you actually want to be inside it. A marriage is not something that survives on love alone. It survives on daily choices. The choice to respect. The choice to receive. The choice to stay present when presence is hard. The choice to be his partner instead of his manager. His friend instead of his obstacle. The woman he chose instead of the woman he is trying to outlast. You still have time to make different choices. But time is the one thing that does not wait. Drop your story in the comments. I am not asking for engagement. I am asking because I actually want to know where you are, what this stirred in you, what you are still sitting with. And if this reached something real, subscribe. Not for the algorithm. Because this channel exists for one reason only: to tell you the truth about love, with enough honesty to actually change something. I am Miss Anna, eyes open, heart ready. I will see you in the next one.